Preamps. Preamps take the very low signal of electricity that microphones or guitars put out and bring them to line level. Think of a preamp as the one channel of the audio console. The channel may also include aux sends, equalizers, EQs, compressor dynamics, and small faders. The transformer preamp produces a fat and punchy sound known as a neve sound, while a tube preamp produces a warm sound. These preamps are best used for rock, pop, R&B, and rap music. The third preamp, called the transistor/Class A, produces a clean/transparent sound, no coloration sound, and they are best used for jazz, classical, and rock music. Signal routing. The basics of signal routing is where you plug a microphone, electric guitar, or another electronic device into a preamp, and that preamp is connected to the input in Pro Tools. Whatever audio you put out goes through cycle, with the first stage being the source, where the audio actually came from, such as your voice or an instrument, the preamp processing, putting compressors or EQ on, ending up on the recorder, a DAW or an analog tape, mixing the song, plugins, automation, etc., coming out of the monitors, headphones, or speakers, and finally, when you're satisfied with the final product, you can bounce it into a .wav file and compress it into an MP3 file. Or you can put it on a CD. Nobody really does that anymore because you have Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, YouTube, etc., to make a route. Make sure that the Pro Tools session is on 44.1 kHz. Then make a new mono track. Then you should name that track by double-clicking on the label and naming it whatever you want. On the top bar, on the mix window, on the track, you can select your input. In this case, you can select the A3 mono input. You can name an input by selecting window and then I/O setup, input output, and then going into a tab called input. Next, select a bar with an unnamed input signal or named input signal if you want to change the name. Then type in a name. In this case, name it guitar or GTR. After that, click on the bar below the input bar and select the output. In this case, select the A12 stereo output. Then on the region where you select insert/plugin, select a preamp plugin and adjust it however you want. In this case, select the amp farm plugin. Then finally on the track, click the record button and then go to the edit window and click on the second record button. You may also put some EQ and reverb on it if you like. And the next video title is called Vocals. The type of microphone you use is entirely up to you, because you may sound good with a dynamic mic, while you may sound better with a condenser mic or ribbon mic, or vice versa, or any other type of variation. When you're about to record, make sure to turn up your microphone to a good level, not too loud and not too quiet, and also make sure you're in a room or in a vocal booth with little to no background noise. If for any reason you go off key in some parts of the song but you don't want to cut it out or re-record, you can use a pitch correction software such as Melodyne, Wave Mechanics, Pitch Doctor, or Antares Auto-Tune. You may also want to use delay plugins such as Mod Delay 3 or Reverb, plugins such as Deverb, optional of course, or you may want to add automation if you want. Mixing Part 1. If you have a bunch of instruments in the same room, it is very important to put each microphone on them and put them in different audio tracks, but more specifically, put your drum sounds in separate audio tracks, such as toms, hi-hats, or kick drum, or snares, and you may also want to make separate tracks for the overhead microphones above the drums, usually so that you can pan them. The basic concepts of mixing are having consistent melodies and rhythms, making sure you don't monitor too loud, meaning that the VU meter shouldn't hit the very top, especially for a very long time, as it may cause distortion, tinnitus, possible permanent threshold shift, or even possible acoustic trauma. And also monitor at a constant level, because it would be very weird if some sounds suddenly became too loud or too quiet. unless you do correctly via automation. And because at louder levels we're more sensitive to mid-range and we are less sensitive to bass if the music is at softer levels, so it is recommended that 70 to 80 decibels is a standard or safe level. Mixing part 2. On a kick drum, you should have the low end between 60 to 110 cycles, and the mud sound should be between 200, 500, 600 cycles. Or if you'd like, you can add some snap in the high end, usually between 1K to 10K cycles. On the snare drum, you should have the low end between 150 and 300 cycles, depending on what type of music you're making. In the overhead mics, you may roll off the high ends as to avoid phase issues from low end and to clear the picture of the drum set using a high-pass filter. Mixing part 3. To finish a tune and making it as loud as the radios without causing distortion or masking other instruments, you can use a peak limiter plugin. The best ones are called L2, Ultra Maximizer, and Maxim. As the name suggests, it cuts off some of the wave peaks similar to a compressor to bring the song forward. It is also very important to not touch the master fader unless you absolutely have to, as it will affect all of the tracks and may cause clipping, so use an analog device such as the Studio Com instead. The big secret part 1. When you think you have a really good mix, but when you put it on a music streaming platform or a CD, it sounds completely different. The cause may be your room where you recorded in the first place, or your speakers were placed in your room, or how many speakers you do or don't have. If you hear standing waves, you may have low frequency problems, or if you hear early reflections, you may have high or mid-frequency problems, or you may have recorded in an area where there's too much background noise, so make sure your studio's quiet. The big secret part 2. When you record, sometimes you may notice that your computer or hard drive is making too much noise. This is because you may unintentionally raise your noise floor that masks low levels in your music and may degrade your sound quality. One way to prevent noise floor is to either go into a quieter room, or you can store noisy equipment away in a closet, and the second way to get rid of noise floor is to use cables. The big secret part 3. If you want to be more careful with your recording, you can use something called a frequency response graph. The frequency response graph shows you volume differences at different frequencies. For example, if the waveform is on a line, that means it's flat, accurate response. When it's below the line, that means it's too quiet, and if it's above the line, it's too loud. The y-axis is the sound pressure level, while the y-axis is the frequency in hertz. The big secret part 4. When high and mid frequencies come out of the speakers and sound travels not just to you, but everywhere, including the objects or people in the area, such as the sound bouncing off of surfaces, the reflection, or the echo, the sound being trapped into surfaces absorption, the sound going through the surfaces transmission, and sound going around the surfaces diffraction. Early reflections are when the sound bounces off of walls and objects that are closer to you and combines with the direct sound coming from the speakers. The big secret part 5. A few ways to treat your rear wall with absorption is to hang insulation, add bass traps, or you can buy a semicircular diffuser that acts like a panel membrane absorber. Just add insulation and cover it with masonite. You should also avoid high racks or any hard surfaces, as they can create reflections. It is also recommended to have an angled wall and to have 2 speakers be parallel and on each corner to each other.